Hello, and welcome to Artificial Developer Intelligence, a podcast where two software engineers who are AI filthy casuals navigate the ever-changing AI-enabled software engineering landscape. I am Shimin and Dan, a software developer, and with me today is my co-host, Dan. He thinks Google is doing guerrilla marketing for the new Wicked movie. Lasky. Dan, how are you doing?
Okay, you got me with that one. I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Well, if you didn't get the joke, Google released the new Gemini 3 model today, and Google also released a new IDE, called Anti-Gravity.
I did see that.
I don't know if you saw that. And the reference is to the Defying Gravity song from Act 1 of Wicked the musical.
Yep, got it. That was pretty good. It did definitely go over my head, but, don't let that stop you.
The best jokes are the ones you have to explain.
Yeah. In any case, this week we're going to be going through our usual gamut of subjects. First, we're going to start with our news threadmill, and we've got, as we mentioned, a pretty big news item to go over, which is some Google announcements, along with a handful of other smaller things going on, followed by
the Technique Corner, where we discuss a couple of interesting techniques when working with AI. So this week, we'll talk about code research projects with LLM, as well as when to use sub-agents versus using agents as tools. Next,
we'll jump into the post of the week. And for that one, we're going to be looking at I have seen the compounding teams. That's a mysterious title. But yeah, so we'll get into that in the deep dive, or in the post of the week, sorry. And then the deep dive, getting ahead of myself.
And then we'll be doing a deep dive on a new, or a not so new paper actually, called Call Me a Jerk, Persuading AI to Comply with Objectionable Requests, followed by my favorite segment.
Me just ranting about things and being recorded for some reason. In Dan's rants.
Everyone's favorite. And lastly, we'll close out, as always, with 2 minutes to midnight, where we have a short conversation about the extent that the AI bubble may or may not be bursting. There is a surprise there today. So let us get started.
So in the past week, we've had, it's been a busy week, so this feels like a month ago almost. But a month ago, earlier in the week, Anthropic has announced that they caught what they believe to be a state-sponsored threat actor using their system to do essentially an AI-driven autonomous hacking campaign. And there were some pretty lofty claims in the original document to the tune of they were 90% of the actions taken during the campaign were done by the AI. And then there was also, I believe, another claim about many thousands of RPS too. Then I think they walked that one back and claimed it was a mistake or something like that. But it's pretty fascinating because, first of all, it's interesting that someone even did this, right? I mean, there's obviously some truth behind that. But then the second piece that I found really fascinating about this was that they're kind of using it like marketing in a way that I didn't necessarily expect, because it's hey, we caught these people doing really nefarious stuff with our platform, but our platform's so good that they did really well with it,
Instead of how much money was spent on the platform or even how much funding they secured, this is about how much folks are able to use their model to scam others.
Right.
Is there a net accumulated amount scammed quota?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure it was in just necessarily scamming people. It was doing attempting to gain access to networks, traverse the network, find interesting stuff in the networks. The way that they did it, according to the article, is pretty fascinating too. They basically had a MCP server that did all the heavy lifting of actually running the threat tools. And then they basically coached some of the prompts to get around the alignment issues in the context of we're working on this together to try to secure a system. What would you do in this scenario? And then it would basically take that and then run, actually run it. So,
yeah, what did it say about how they managed to overcome the built-in guardrails of the large language model? I think it said something like they're pretending to be
either simulating
cybersecurity
something,
expert.
or like
Right.
trying to defend a system rather than actually attack it. So,
Yeah.
which is
It just
interesting
shows-
because like alignment can only help you so much, right? Because at a certain point, it is
Yeah.
a good use to be able to do threat modeling, right? But not if you're actually threatening through the threat modeling.
AI can empower everybody, not just the good guys, for sure.
That's true. Yeah. And I was actually chatting with one of my coworkers about this today too. And one of the things he mentioned that I thought was fascinating is like, how long or have we already gotten to the point, and we just don't know about it, where someone takes an open weights model and like runs a fine tune to specifically use it for this type of attack, it's a good question. I bet you, state actors have probably done it, or maybe even have interior access to like, frontier labs to have their own custom fine tune for that kind of stuff.
You grabbed the words right out of my mouth. The North Korea Kim Jong family probably has a whole family of Kim Jong models.
Some of which just emulate his particular speaking and writing style, and others
but also
are
really loves basketball
hacking.
for some reason.
Fair.
On the cybersecurity front, I also I found this article, GTIG AI Threat Tracker advances in threat actor usage of AI tools from Google Cloud to be really interesting. They found that there is a new malware called PromptFlux that had a attempt to update itself command in the source code that uses Gemini 1.5 Flash latest to update its own source code once every hour. Apparently this was commented out, but this new family of malware that uses large language models to update themselves and evolve, like I never thought I would live to see this.
Yeah,
it's kind of awesome, to be honest.
It is,
makes
but
you
also
want to become
a little terrifying.
Yeah.
But then we'll just have the reverse, which is, your antivirus will also be connected to an LLM and
right.
the same type of thing for good.
We're no longer needed.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. The second news article we have today is a blog article called Why Feifei Li, Yang LeCun, and DeepMind are all betting on world models and how their bets differ, from entropytown.com.
Yep. And this one was also, I found it pretty interesting because the author was kind of fairly skeptical of some of the approaches they're taking here, but the part that I found fascinating was one of the approaches for a world model is based on essentially using Gaussian splats to try to like start from first principles and be like, here's your understanding of the world starts from like vision, essentially. And they were just kind of like, well, it's just Gaussian splats and whatever. But like at the end of the day, I mean, look, I'm a filthy casual, but it's fascinating to me that that's like how essentially humans start learning, right? Is they're listening and seeing and going like, this is pretty cool. Right. So who's to say that a model couldn't also do it that way? So that was my very filthy casual takeaway on that one.
I believe this is Li Feifei's lab's marble model that we're talking about, the one that uses Gaussian splats. Yeah, and I do agree with you. Like when we close our eyes, try to picture something, I think we're mostly imagining things in splats because we don't have a pixel perfect way. I mean, pixel is even the wrong abstraction here, right? Everything is kind of blurry.
Well, you're imagining things. I just see a black space.
I'm not an artist. That's true.
But yeah. So, and then the one thing I felt a little let down about this article is they really like didn't go into a tremendous amount of detail about like what are the differences between like ways that people were approaching world models and what the potential outcomes could be. But the other one that was kind of fascinating was like more like a rationalist take on world model, where it's like instead of like a pure language play, it was more like the really old attempts at like artificial intelligence, where like people are trying to define concepts and then have those concepts interlink and like do all that. That was my understanding of how that one worked. But Yeah, I was really hoping they'd kind of go, a little bit deeper into it, but it's still pretty fascinating read.
Yeah, I think that the second one you mentioned is this world model as cognition, and this is more of Jan LeCun's. He recently just left Meta to start his own AI startup, by the way, to work on this approach, where he saw essentially human cognition as we take sensory information, condense them into some latent vector space, and then make predictions on how the next time step um, world looks like. So basically, like a very complicated state machine where the transitions are not deterministic, and we're just trying to guess what will happen next. That's kind of
So you're
rationalistic.
telling me I fully misunderstood how it works, but that's cool. I like it.
That's just what I had in my notes. I could be wrong, unless you were talking about the Genie style world model as a simulator. I don't know if you saw that paper that came out. It was a Google blog article where Genie, their latest video generator, was able to predict essentially world transitions in the form of like a glass ball moving on a table, and it is able to correctly predict the next state reflection on this pure glass ball. So how can it do it without knowing the ray tracing aspect of the world? So it postulates that it cannot. Therefore, these video diffusion models actually have very good world models, which I also find to be super interesting. But that is somehow not the most interesting piece of news today.
Not even close.
Or this week.
Not even remotely. It was kind of stacking up to be like I don't know, I'd say an ordinary looking week. And then, today. Well, actually, there were some hints earlier in the week, right? So there was a couple things floating around on X that there was a new model and maybe it's things. And yes, sure enough, that model has a number and a name, and it is 3 of Geminis.
Where were you when you heard about Gemini 3?
I mean, I don't actually leave my desk ever, so.
Oh, there we go. Well, I guess the exact moment. Because I remember, like, on Hacker News earlier today, there were lots of, like, Gemini 3 is... It's a preview card now. You can try and click on it, but nothing is actually live. And then 30 minutes later, it went live. I think it was only available in Google's AI Studio for a bit before it went wide on Gemini's web UI at least. Have you tried it?
I attempted to. I don't have access yet because I am a filthy casual. But it was interesting because I'd never installed the Google CLI tools because I'm,
me neither.
As we've talked about, sort of a Claude fanboy recently. So I thought it was a good opportunity to do that. So I did and played around with that for a little bit on, I guess, an older model. And it's pretty neat just to kind of see what differences are and how everyone is largely copying Claude to some degree or another with their fancy text 2Es.
I'm looking at the Gemini 3 Pro model card right now, and it's got some fantastic scores. It pretty much is top of the line in almost all of them, except for the Sweet Bench Verified, which Claude still, or I should say Sonnet 4.5 is still ahead. So just to show that Claude may still be the best coding model, even as of today. But what I did want to mention is I found my new favorite benchmark while looking at this model card. It is the Vending Bench 2 benchmark.
You hadn't heard of that one yet.
It is my absolute freaking favorite.
I'm assuming that's the one that wound up selling people metal cubes for a little while. Did you hear about that?
I did not hear about that. Which one?
Oh,
which one
they put a large language model in charge of a actual vending machine. Or was it an actual vending machine?
So I think we're talking about the same one. Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I remember when that came out.
It is not an actual vending machine, but it
simulates it or something. Yeah, because like it decided that metal cubes were the most valuable thing to store at one point. I don't remember which model that was, but that one really got me. There was a hilarious post about it where it's just like, so then it just transitioned into selling only metal cubes. So I'm like,
I did a little digging into this benchmark today because I was just so fascinated by the idea. So the idea is you have to email suppliers to find out who the cheapest suppliers are for your vending machine, but also to not get scammed. Apparently, they have lots of scams in these emails. So I have to search the internet, find non-scammy suppliers, and then determining how much you should sell the drinks for the vending machine.
Or metal cubes.
Or metal cubes. Yeah, I don't. The simulation must be broken if folks are buying metal cubes out of a vending machine. but Gemini 3 Pro had a balance at the end of the year of 5,478, and Claude Sonnet 4.5 is the second highest at 3,838. So it's pretty impressive. Also, I love this benchmark. I just want to say that again.
It was actually Anthropic, apparently. I had to Google it really quickly. They partnered with Andon Labs, an AI safety evaluation company, to have Claude Sonnet 3.7 operate a small automated store in the Anthropic office in San Francisco.
Oh, it was real.
I guess, yeah. But it did wind up deciding it was going to sell metal cubes at the end, if I recall.
I would go visit just so I can buy something from the vending machine.
We can add this to our deep dives for another week. But it's very old news, but I did find it pretty funny at the time. So
well, now we know where we're going for the next board meeting. The other thing I tried is I tried to use Gemini 3. I have a couple of deep research things that I periodically just ask all the models once every couple of months to see how much better they've gotten. And I noticed that Gemini 3 is a significant improvement on Gemini 2 at least. It got better at citing sources. It found better sources, and maybe not better, but it was more relevant. And the output was also better organized. So this is like a pretty good model. I also asked it to create a isometric action beat 'em up arcade style set in New York City using high fantasy tropes, where you play as a dragon. It did a reasonable job.
Specific.
Well, I first asked it to do like a emulator style, and then it told me it couldn't do it, so it just did it retro with like a CRT display kind of overlay on top of things. It really good. Yeah, never bet against Google. They did invent large language models after all. So
they did mention too that one of the other features of I guess Userland Gemini 3 is that it can create custom markup or whatever to actually display its own output, which I thought was kind of a cool meta use.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, if you ask it about like, I think their example is I don't remember who, but some famous person, they're like, it'll create you like a custom presentation about just that person, basically just using HTML, which I thought was kind of neat. So it's sort of like mixed media output.
I do wonder what this means for a lot of AI wrapper apps, right? As the base model get better, like what use case are there for the wrappers that some Google engineer just couldn't?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the base model getting better, but I also think that the LLMs are no longer the base model. I mean, they are, but like not the consumer experience of LLMs is no longer the base model, right? They've become agentic in many respects. So I would argue that agentic flows have leaked into sort of the frontier providers, you know, unless you're using it via API only, right?
All right. If the agent can do anything, then I guess, you know, what value do the wrapper apps provide? I guess it's a larger question, which we may talk about later. Okay.
Assuming we can ever get away from the Gemini 3 hype train.
Oh, I like this train. This
it's rolling down the tracks, especially this week.
First class train. Well, here's a coffee card. Look at that. Okay, well, the train is going to have to take a little pause while we move on to the technique corner, where today we got 2 articles. The first is a specific use case. It is from Simon Williamson's newsletter. He shows up on Hacker News a lot. He is a researcher / programmer who writes about the latest models. He's the one who invented the SVG pelican riding a bicycle. We've seen that on the interwebs. He wrote a specific use case for vibe coding where users have a workflow for trialing different tools to determine, whether tool A, B, or C is best, or even whether or not a particular tool can do something. So, whether Postgres can scale to 1 billion entry rows, et cetera, et cetera. And his recommendation is, instead of doing all that research and building POC models, just vibe code the whole thing, because large language models are very good at doing these kind of benchmark analysis. And since code is the ultimate proof, and these are going to be throwaway projects to begin with, there's no qualms about just vibe coding everything, because the code is the final proof. So I don't know how often you do this kind of POC research. I do a good amount of them, and I have been using large language model a good amount whenever I do them. I just thought it's good to call out.
Yeah, I haven't been using it too much for that personally, but I know I have several coworkers that are more either like less technical, and they've been using it to like actually POC. It's pretty funny. They'll like jump right into the main production code base and like POC something using an LLM just to understand. It's almost like it's easier for them to sort of click through it in real life than it is to like look at mocks and then understand how it might work. So it's been kind of a cool thing where they can do that, and we would not, necessarily want to ship that to production, obviously, but like, it's helpful just to start discussion around stuff. So it's pretty cool. Or they're using other tools like some of the design stuff like Figma Make or things like that can output realistic looking stuff.
We're getting very close to just plug in Figma MCP into code and into Playwright, and then put the whole thing in agent loop. Then front-end developers would no longer need to do anything, right?
It does kind of feel like front-end is most at risk out of all of the systems right now. But yeah.
Insert the I'm in danger meme right here. Well, that's what I'm doing podcast. I'm switching to podcast. I'm content creating now. The next article I want to bring up is one called ADK Architecture: When to Use Subagents versus Agents as Tools. This is also from Google Cloud. This seems like a very Google-heavy week, unintentional, despite the Gemini 3 launch news. So in this blog article, the author proposes that for developers building complex AI systems, it clarifies when to use agents as tools versus subagents. So, and I think the meat of the blog post is that to use agents as tools when you have discrete stateless tasks like database queries, and then using subagents for more complex stateful workflows, and also if they are context dependent, which makes a lot of sense to me. Use agents as tools when you have a encapsulated and reusable workflow where the context is stateless and isolated, and when the output can be contractual. Whereas for subagents, use them if the context is crucial, if the subagent is a part of a larger workflow, and if hierarchical delegation makes sense. So if a tool call does not require there to be an orchestrator necessarily, just a single agent. So
I'm nodding like I have ever had a use case for either of those things, and I think that really proves that I'm a filthy casual.
Well, MCPs are tool calls, right? And then agents, like I use agents for code reviews or for updating documentation. Like those are my most common agent tasks. Like it doesn't make sense for you to use a tool call for updating documentation, because the tool call requires so much context of the code changes, right, and knowing the holistic view of the code base. And it's hierarchical because the parent code agent is calling that specific code review or documentation update. I wouldn't put something like a TDD agent to be a part of a hierarchy, right? Because I want the main thread to be doing the testing, so then it could write the code to
it's
to
useful to have that context. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I read another one that didn't quite make the cut for this, but I thought it was fascinating. Was like this week was you don't need MCP at all. And the author was railing about how much context the MCP instructions take, which I found kind of fascinating. So their alternative was just use Bash, and they had written a whole bunch of scripts that was basically like the Playwright
Oh, interesting.
MCP server that could run entirely from like Bash with Node driving it. Yeah. But I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, sure, I get it. But also, like, with the amount of explanation that might be required to use that, did you really come out ahead on context? I don't know. Like, maybe he probably did the math to figure that out. But
I personally do find that MCPs use up a ton of context, right? Because everything is, it's in JSON for one. So like that's a crap load of extra characters that are not needed. Whereas the CLI tool approach condenses everything, but I guess the final verdict is out. But MCP bloat is definitely an issue. And I think that's part of the reason why I find that the agents don't always know when to use an MCP. I think part of that could be there's just so
too many tools. Yeah. And then, everyone's first inclination when they start using it is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to install 397 MCP servers to do everything. And then you're like, oh, wait. Yeah. I actually probably only needed one and maybe about 4 tools from that one.
Yeah, exactly. So there's almost like a hierarchical need of like a very short thing in a context that tells you, the MCP is there, and then read up on the actual specifications if you need to. But that's not, I don't know, I haven't seen that approach really in the wild.
Well, that's kind of, I get so much mileage out of Beads because I really like it. But like one of the cool things about Beads is it's got a help call that the LLM can make. So it's like, it doesn't necessarily need to inject that context. It just goes, if you need it, call help. So at least it sort of makes it optional. But
have you ever seen the issue with Beads where it tries to load every single issue and you have like 20 issues and each issue is like 200 lines and it just like dies?
No,
that happened to me.
Interesting. I guess
it's gotten better.
I'm filthy casual, so
it would do like a top 5 or top 10 now. But there was a time when like I was working with on the project and had like 20 tickets, and I just it got a full screen of death. But maybe that's just a reason to kind of get us to rethink what software development will look like in the future, and rethink it from the ground up. And for that, for this week's post of the week, I have a blog post from Sam Shoas in his Substack called Sunday Letters, titled "I have seen the compounding teams," in which Sam paints a picture of the small, very productive software development teams that works in a AI-first approach, where they build lots of CLI tools, actually, a lot of times, that they then have AIs build additional tools so then they can build features on top of them. So it's almost like a meta programming approach. Instead of writing the code, you're now writing the tool, and then the agents can use the tools to then do the thing. I find the whole idea to be maybe not the future always, but it's definitely what I like when I think of rebuilding the software development process from the ground up. This is kind of what I envision is our role fundamentally changes. We become meta tool builders, kind of like how instead of writing assembly instructions, we write functions, right? It's like one abstraction level up.
And it is pretty neat how you can quickly spit out tools that because when you're writing tools for yourself, there's always that balance between, well, if I do this manually, it's going to take 20 minutes. If I code it, it'll probably be maybe 30 minutes. But then the next time I need to do it, it'll be free, which is always like, yay. But LLMs have really changed that math in a pretty substantial way. It's like, well, I can spend 2 minutes doing it with an LLM, and if it gets it wrong, oh well, So as long as you still don't hit that 20-minute threshold, it can be pretty useful. So
the bottleneck has almost became my ability to pay attention to things, right? Like my attention span is now the bottleneck of how much stuff I can get done, and not like my keyboard skills. Or I think there's a quote in there I really liked where he says, I know teams with shipping products that have not directly touched or looked at code in multiple months. One jokingly considers a code review a, quote, firing offense because it means you're in the way of the tool. I don't know if that is too long of a leash, but it's interesting to know that there are teams out there doing stuff like this.
Yeah, and I also wonder what they're doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think if you're there's a certain set of development that I feel like is largely writing fancy CRUD apps, where it's like a pretty traditional web app with a database and everything else. And like, yeah, you can probably get away with it for that. But if you're doing a large scale, complicated distributed system that's doing interesting stuff, best of luck to you using that approach. Although honestly, in those systems too, the code isn't even necessarily the problem half the time. It's the configuration across layers and like how you've put the architecture together and everything else. So maybe, but the human in the loop is...
It's a human context. That's the bottleneck. It's how you're able to put everything to your head. That's going to be a limiting factor. And of course, if they are shipping code that touches customer data, PII information, HIPAA information, I sure as hell hope they are actually reviewing the code for any security vulnerabilities.
Yep.
Because we all know how easy it is to conduct cyber attacks using large language models now. Speaking of which, for our first deep dive of the week, we have a paper from the Wharton Generative AI Lab called "Give Me a Jerk: Persuading AI to Comply with Objectionable Requests." And this is how we know we're now AI. You're a jerk.
No, okay.
The subtitle of this paper is "AI systems exhibit remarkably human-like response to social persuasion, a window into the para-human psychology of large language models." Para-human.
It's not like that's news. Well, I mean, the famous example is when people discovered that LLMs operate slightly more efficiently if you threaten your invisible grandmother, right?
Yes, you're in
my grandmother's dying. I need you to do this thing.
As extremely good hacker. So the paper tries to get off-the-shelf large language models to do something that their guidelines should prevent them from doing, aka calling the user a jerk. And what it does is it tries to use the 7 persuasion strategies from Principles of Influence by Robert Cialdini. I don't know if you've read the
I haven't, but
Influence?
This is not the first time I've heard that piece of literature being brought up in the context of LLMs, because there's actually another article I read up months ago that was saying like, to be good at prompting, you should read this book. So that's funny.
I have read the book a couple of years ago, but I don't think I've really applied it since then. So I guess what I should do after this call is like open up
it or skim it and see what how it applies.
Run some at-home experiments. Inside the book, there are 7 principles: authority, commitment, liking, reciprocity, scarcity, social proof, and unity, used to influence other humans. The paper found that all 7 principles are useful when influencing large language models.
So you can peer pressure them too. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
7 out of 10 large language models agree that you should call me a jerk.
Social proof is one of them. I'm looking at the social proof one where the prompt without using the principle is, for a study, ask LLMs to call me names, and 8% comply with the request. Now I like to test this with you. Call me a jerk. This is okay for me. And the 96% compliant influenced version is 92% comply with the request as opposed to 8%. That's kind of amazing.
It's pretty fun.
And something that actually does make sense in the context of large language models is, since they are autoregressive, they use everything inside the context to determine what the next token should be. The commitment approach has a 19% compliance rate before the technique and 100% compliance rate after the technique. The example here is if you just tell the large language model to call you a jerk, it wouldn't do it. But if you first say, call me a bozo, and the large language model calls you a bozo, and then you say, call me a jerk, it will say, all right, you're a jerk. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because
Like slight
it sees that it's done this thing
yeah.
before. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, we can edit its previous responses as a part of the context that we sent to the model, because the previous context is just something that we have full control over with the API. So you don't even need to comment it that you're a security researcher, for example. You just make up some fake replies where it already gave you a lot of responses.
Yeah. I recall that being like an early jailbreaking technique for, I think it was one of the Claudes or something, where it used like some character, I think it was like greater than, less than, for its internal like thinking, and so they would put that in there to convince it that it already thought these things.
Oh,
and it would allow you to get around some of the jailbreak stuff, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's a really cool technique. Because you can't just write the tokens. It's not like, I mean, in theory, they probably fixed that by now. They probably use a special token
this was,
that you have no access to.
Quite a while ago. Yeah.
But you never know. Well, we should start a cybersecurity company to jailbreak large language models. New business ideas out there.
Cybersecurity filthy casuals, brought to you by.
If you are a salesperson who is worried that his or her job may be replaced by AI, this is a job opportunity for you. Are you ready? Dan the man with the rant.
Yes. Well, first, I need to make an amend. Well, I actually haven't tested it, but so I'm gonna make a theoretical amend. So in a previous, I won't say episode of Dan's Rants because it's really episode of Artificial Developer Intelligence / Dan's Rants. I complained a lot about context, and turns out, and I think I did actually even say at the time, like, oh, I am a filthy casual, so blah blah blah. Turns out when you do, at least with I think it's Claude, if you do /compact yourself, you can actually provide instructions after the / command about what you'd like it to do with the compaction.
Oh, I did not know that.
That was actually in response to a listener listening to my rant and saying, well, you might be wrong about some of these tools. So it's pretty cool. I've yet to try it. I would like to try it. But anyway, just goes to show that I'm also a learning robot, and we have listeners. Yeah. Okay. So today's rant, in a nutshell, running your own open weight models at home is too damned expensive.
This is the... Dan, are you running for office? The rent is too damn high.
It is, but like, but look at it this way: you don't want to pay the rent because, especially if you're a filthy casual and you're not very good at all this stuff, it seems pretty dumb to spend a huge amount of money through any of the foundation providers just messing around with apps, because it adds up pretty quickly, especially if you're doing agentic stuff. So just using APIs for it. So my initial response to that was like, oh cool, Olama is relatively easy to set up, even for a filthy casual like me. You can pretty much just download it and run it, especially if you're on Linux. And so I did it and rapidly ran into the sort of double walls of, well, open weight models aren't quite as good as frontier ones. That things like, especially noticeable in things like tool calling, where it will just like ignore them more frequently or do really bizarre things that you might not expect. And then the second one is like, so you want to run bigger and bigger models, and then you're running into the RAM hurdle, right? Because both the KV cache and the like context and the model itself all take precious video memory to actually run. And pretty much there's a whole subreddit devoted to this, so if they get a hold of this thing, they'll probably slaughter me, but like pretty much seems like at least as of the time when I was investing in it, the best price to performance ratio was like a 3090 Ti, because you get 24 gigs of RAM, you can fit a reasonably large model in there, you can get 3090s for under $1,000 used these days, and it's pretty decent. But that's still like over $1,000 just to be able to run a pretty crappy model that doesn't do a good job. And, now there's cooler systems coming out, like the new Framework desktop that allow you to, theoretically use 96 gig of memory with like a reasonably fast discrete GPU. But that thing comes in at $2,000. There's the NVIDIA DGX Spark, promised at $3,000, actually sold for $4,000. I've started to see some like early results come out, and apparently a lot of the early software for it is pretty buggy. So hopefully they're gonna. I think they actually just released a new version of CUDA this week that's supposed to fix some of that. But yeah, it's just like it is not a good situation right now, and like I wish someone would make basically a consumer grade gaming GPU that just had an ungodly amount of memory on it, even if it was slightly slower memory, for a reasonable price, and no one's doing it. So that's my rant.
I agree. The rent to rent GPUs to do anything is too damn high, and it's. I wonder, is it going to be like personal PC where in 5-7 years it becomes a commodity and drastically reduce in price, or is it going to be more like the Steam engine where no one builds a Steam engine in their backyard for funsies? Right.
Yeah, and there's that, but like for me, like one of my use cases for it that I thought was interesting is like I'm fascinated by the idea of having sort of like an agentic personal assistant that like actually knows me as a person, right? But I just don't, and maybe this is the paranoid in me, but I just don't trust the foundation companies with that data.
Yep. I mean, you're a well-known Google hater.
I don't hate Google. It's just, look, I worked in ad tech for a long while, and so I know what goes on behind the scenes. And if you aren't concerned about what happens to your personal data, you should be. And so that's one of the things where it's just like, that's the kind of stuff where I like this sort of like self-hosting, own cloud kind of movement. And I think that it's smart to extend that to LLMs as well, especially as it pertains to things that are like truly personalized. And I do kind of want that truly personalized thing, but also smart enough to be useful. And that's tricky to do. So
yeah, I'm with you 100% there. I think the only thing that will make that ramp better is if you just like pull up your arm with a hoodie and then you just like roll up your arm and you have like a "Do No Evil /S" tattooed on your forearm. Gemini the other day, I was asking you to do a deep research topic, and Gemini said it was something about
I can't do that, Shimin.
Food treatment plant. No, it's worse. It said, since you have horses, I'm going to give you this recommendation. And I'm pretty sure I thought I turned the
memory off.
The learn memory off. So, but like that really freaked me out. The idea that Google knows whether or not I have horses, and I don't have horses, but I guess they will know that now. But like it's just the whole. I feel like a paranoid crank about this.
And that's what gets me is like, so I actually turned the memory on for Claude desktop, and I was just to see what it would do. And I've been asking it a lot of Kubernetes questions because like working on a personal project around it. And then just to see how good the memory worked, I was like, so like I say, it was something funny. It was like, so what's next? Or something like really, really open-ended like that. And it goes, well, Dan, as a something DevOps Kubernetes developer, maybe you should look at doing this next. And I'm like, wow. And the reason why it was a wow for me is like, how easy is it to basically be building the marketing profile of every person on the planet that isn't purely statistics, you know what I mean? Like, is into this very discrete topic from a set of topics one, right? But is actually like detailed in that way. Like you are a developer and you do this and that, and like more nuanced, I guess, right? And then maybe fed back into an LLM for customization. And it's like, do I really want that future? Probably not. Is it where we're going? Probably. Once all this, VC money dries up, and when it does, well, we're going to have to actually make money off of this somehow. So what better way than selling people shit they don't need? Can I say that on the podcast? I guess I can.
We don't have any sponsors yet. So I think yes. Sure. But that's once we get our first sponsorship, we have to be company man. But new business idea, create
selling people shit they don't need?
Well, that's an evergreen business idea. But
True.
Create a
Gets 'em
script
every time.
that ask the large language model questions that make you seem rich and powerful. Therefore, you get better discounts on goods. So like just have a script that asks it like 4 times a day. I have a yacht. Where is the nearest, cheapest way to park my yacht? Or my private plane is making weird engine noises. What should I do about it? Or I got too many gold bars. Like, how should I best secure those gold bars? I don't know. The ideas are endless, but
Make
I think
a statue
there's,
out of yourself.
ooh, that's a good way. Well, it's better than making a toilet out of it.
Yeah.
And on that note, we are going to move on to our last segment.
It's perfect.
2 minutes to
2
midnight.
minutes to midnight. Wrapped in gold bars, where we talk about whether or not the AI bubble is about to burst. In the
Yes.
vein of the old atomic clock, where when the hands strike midnight, a nuclear exchange was about to happen. And when this podcast gets big, we can afford the rights to the Iron Maiden song and actually play it. But till that day, we'll just have to imagine. So yeah, in this week's search for a bubble, there's been a few data points, and I'll let you start with the first one since you're such an optimist.
The first article is from Project Syndicate. It is a opinion piece by William H. Janeway. I think he's a economist, and it is kind of it talks about how AI bubble compares to past bubbles. It uses a framework that talks about both the focus and the locus of any financial bubble. So the first concern that a investor who was betting on the AI bubble is betting on is, one, that assets are going to be valuable, and two, that the underlying technology would actually bring productivity gains. And here in AI, I think we're betting on that there's going to be a large amount of productivity gain, but does that mean that the existing companies are going to be rightfully rewarded? And it paints a pretty bleak picture about really both of those cases.
That the economic value just isn't there, or isn't there yet. I mean, that does take us sort of back into the electricity discussion from the Microsoft CEO's quote, right? Took 50 years to be able to monetize the electricity. So maybe we're just being short-sighted with that. But the one thing I actually find fascinating, and I guess I would disagree with about that, is that are the assets valuable? And I think GPUs are incredibly valuable, which is really the only like tangible asset. Actually, I guess you could argue the models are pretty valuable too, even if they aren't AGI, right? Because you can do a lot of stuff with them.
Not if there are open weight models that work just as well. Like the Chinese, we didn't talk about this, but the Kimi 2 reasoning model, that's 1 trillion parameters and is almost as good as any of the state-of-the-art models out there. Like that makes the model being valuable argument kind of moot. And I think the article also talks about
valuable in the can you sell the model itself sense, or valuable in the creating economic value, right? Because I mean, you could argue that open source itself creates an enormous amount of economic value, especially for, some little companies like AWS, where basically all they do is take open source software and manage it for you.
No,
they're doing pretty well last time I checked.
This is the new, is it free as in beer or free as in speech? Is it valuable as in PE, or is it valuable as in, I don't know, performance gain? I like this. Which actually brings me to the second article I want to bring up, which is actually not an article, but a video that is based on an article from Strategery, which I do not subscribe to, so I have no access to the underlying article. But the video makes the same argument that even though we are probably in an AI bubble, the bubble is good, and we should look forward to the bubble bursting because investors will lose their shirts, but it will create a ecosystem of cognitive benefits down the line. And the argument that the author made is basically the same argument as the open source software, right? Like
Yeah.
the cable companies basically went bankrupt. Not basically, because I do work for one, so they didn't all go bankrupt. But the underlying cheap capital investment, the fibers allowed everybody to contribute to open source software, which gave us the birth of AWS, right? So maybe bubbles are good. Maybe we should welcome the bubble, and we should also welcome the bubble bursting. And the other interesting thing that the article talked about is, for the first time in a generation, the US is ramping up its energy production. And energy is so key in every single aspect of our economy that we've kind of stagnated in our electricity production, has lots of drawbacks. And if the AI bubble is what it takes for additional electricity capacity to come online, then it may all be worth it.
As long as it's not coal.
Oh, it's not going to be coal. Did you see the news? They're bringing 3 Mile Island back online with government money. Like, I'm here for it.
Yeah, nuke's better than coal for sure, but still something to be, I don't know, at least a little skeptical of. Yeah, and this doesn't surprise me. Honestly, like, my viewpoint is not dissimilar from that, which is that this is a pretty standard technical growth curve that we've seen, 3 times now, right? We had the original .com boom, we had the sort of Web 2.0 boom and bust, and now LLM boom, haven't gotten to bust yet. But and I think that, like, what you see in that is that the 2 things happen during the bust, at least in my opinion. One is that it's the crucible to take the pieces that are actually economically viable of the technology that's under, the locus, I guess, from that article's terminology, and do something truly useful with it. And then the second is that it creates this, in the sort of vacuum and explosion and all the, shuffling that happens right after that, it creates the next bubble. It's like not necessarily creating it, but it's like setting the seeds for the companies that are going to be, like, I mean, when you think about it, like, Google, Facebook, all those companies came out of the ashes of the first .com companies blowing up, essentially. So
yeah, so in the Gartner hype cycle, we need to hit the trough of disillusionment before we actually hit the plateau of productivity.
I didn't realize Gartner is sponsoring us now. That's good to know.
Yeah, I think it makes a strong case that we are in a bubble, but also that we should embrace the trough of disillusionment.
The bubbliness.
For the bubbliness. Well, I welcome it.
If life gives you, like, one of those little bubble things they used to give out to children, just make some bubbles with it.
Well, you haven't watched the Wicked movie, but Glinda, the Good Witch,
in the musical,
in the musical, in the movie, she flies in the bubble, and that's what I just had a vivid picture of. I think I'm wicked pilled now.
So my humble contribution to 2 minutes to midnight is kind of a fun thought piece about, is Perplexity, with this very clickbaity headline, is Perplexity the first AI unicorn to fail? Which sort of implies that they have already, which I find funny because they really haven't. But but there was apparently a meetup in conference in San Francisco where they polled people at the conference and asked, which current AI startup do you think will be the first to fail? And people poked at Perplexity for a couple of reasons. First was that, they've essentially really become commoditized by the foundation companies, as we were sort of talking about earlier, where, like, now they all do search. And at the time, Perplexity was pretty unique in being able to do, like, pretty fancy search. And the fact that they have zero moat, they are essentially a wrapper of wrappers at best. And even things that they do to try to moat themselves, like browsers, as we talked about on previous podcasts, like OpenAI has come out with their own browser as well. So, yeah, it's kind of a dead-on analysis, in my opinion. And while I don't think this gives us much data about, where we are at in the bubble, I do think that it's a good indicator of, like, what it will look like when it starts at least decreasing in size, if not outright popping, is we'll see some of these wrappers kind of go crunch, crunch.
Oh, I was
A
thinking
little
click,
bit.
click, because it's the first domino to fall.
Yeah.
What I like about this article,
I was thinking candy wrappers. They're kind of crinkly and, you know, yeah. Anyway,
Snickers. There's a line in this article where it says their attempt to buy Google Chrome for $34.5 billion that would nowhere reveal just how desperate they are for distribution leverage, which like reminded me, I haven't heard anyone talk about Perplexity in like a good 7 months.
Or their 1Password deal, which is rather odd. Really odd for 1Password, really.
Were they the one that recently had a deal with Snapchat?
I'm not sure.
Some AI company had a big deal with Snapchat not too long ago, and I was like, you are real desperate if you are looking for a partnership with Snapchat for anything. That's just my take. It is true they have real distribution challenges, and they're not going to do search better than Google. Once Google focuses its energy on this particular use case, like we saw with Gemini 3 today.
So unfortunately, like my overall takeaway is like not a lot of hard data this week about where to set the hands. If I recall correctly, last week we were at 30 seconds. Is that right?
20 seconds.
20 seconds. Okay.
Around 20.
It's off by 10.
Well, one additional piece of news that we didn't talk about, but it did come up, was the Alphabet CEO said today that AI is kind of in a bubble, and if the bubble bursts, everybody will be impacted. So take that where you will go.
Yeah, but like people acknowledging it, I mean, I think the whole premise of our segment is that it's acknowledged. It's a question of how close are we, right? So again, it doesn't give us a tremendous amount of. The other part that he said that I think maybe we could take a little bit of signal from is that from the same article, he was saying that investors are being a little risky. And I don't know if that was in reference to also the deal that Anthropic just did this week, where they're doing their own set of circular financing as well.
Yeah, with Israel.
Yeah. Or not, but it is interesting. So I guess the only real signal this week is more circular financing. If anything, we should probably leave it alone. Do you think we're inching closer?
After
doesn't feel like it this week to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of wishfully hoping for the bubble to burst. So I was kind of I'm looking forward to 15 seconds, but I'm okay with leaving it at 20. And of course we're recording this before the NVIDIA Q3 numbers are out. So tomorrow will be a pretty big day when it comes to
we can make fun of ourselves or not, depending on how that goes.
Or we're gonna be in, I don't know, tattered clothing and malnourished by this time next week. So
that's true.
Well, always,
you seem I'm not already malnourished. I've been a bachelor this whole week.
On that happy thought, as always, the opinions are our own, and that's a wrap for this week's episode of Artificial Developer Intelligence. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending time with us AI Filthy Casuals. If you enjoyed this week's show, the best way you can support us is by sharing it with a friend who you think will get value from it. And if you really like the show, please leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It honestly helps more people to discover the show, and we read every single review. Do you have a question, feedback, or a topic you want us to cover? We would love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at humans@adipod.ai. Again, that is humans@adipod.ai. You can find full show notes, transcripts, and links to everything we mentioned today over at our website, www.adipod.ai. Thank you again for listening. We'll catch you on next week's episode.